The sky roared, lightning flashed, a blinding white against the bruised sky. Thunder rattled the very air, echoing through the forest. Rain, heavy and relentless, lashed down, each drop exploding against the ground like a tiny bomb. The wind howled like a banshee, tearing at the trees. Branches heavy with leaves bowed low under the onslaught. The air was thick, heavy with the scent of ozone and wet earth. It was a night of untamed fury, a night to be indoors, safe and warm, but not for our protagonist. He was out in the thick of it, caught in the storm's embrace. He trudged on, head down, battling against the wind and rain. His clothes, soaked through, clung to him like a second skin. Every step was a battle, every breath a struggle. The forest was alive with the sounds of the storm. The wind whispered through the leaves, a low, sibilant murmur. Branches creaked and groaned, rubbing against each other like bones. The undergrowth rustled with unseen movement. He squinted into the darkness, his small torch a pathetic beacon against the overwhelming blackness. The beam flickered, casting dancing shadows that stretched and twisted, taking on monstrous forms. Fear, cold and clammy, tightened its grip around his heart. He walked on, driven by a desperate need to reach his destination. The village, his only hope of shelter, seemed impossibly far away. He thought he knew this path, had walked it countless times before, but the storm with its fury had transformed the familiar into something strange and unsettling. And then, as suddenly as it began, the rain stopped. The wind died down, its mournful howl fading to a gentle whisper. The forest, so recently a cacophony of sound, fell silent. The silence, so complete, so absolute, was almost more unnerving than the storm itself. He stopped, his chest heaving as he gasped for breath. He raised his head, letting the silence wash over him. Through the tangled canopy above, he glimpsed a patch of dark sky, and in the heart of that darkness, a single perfect circle of silver, the full moon. He fumbled in his pocket and pulled out his torch. The batteries, already weak, chose that moment to die. The beam flickered once, twice, then vanished, plunging him back into darkness. He cursed under his breath, a knot of fear tightening in his stomach. A flash of lightning illuminated the forest, momentarily banishing the darkness. He flinched, momentarily blinded by the sudden glare. As his vision cleared, he saw the chaos the storm had wrought. Trees lay uprooted, their roots exposed like skeletal fingers reaching for the sky. The air was filled with the panicked cries of birds, disturbed from their roosts. Small animals scurried through the undergrowth, seeking shelter wherever they could find it. The forest, so peaceful moments before, was now a scene of utter devastation. He stood there for a moment, taking in the scene, his heart pounding in his chest. The storm, with its raw power, had stripped away the familiar, leaving behind something alien and threatening. He felt a shiver run down his spine, a primal fear he couldn't quite place. Section 5. Crimson Rain. And then he saw it. Something that sent a fresh jolt of fear through him, something impossible, unbelievable. The rain, which had started again, was no longer the clear, cleansing water of the storm. It was red, a deep, visceral red, like the blood of a fresh kill. He stared, his mind struggling to comprehend what his eyes were seeing. He reached out a hand, his fingers trembling slightly. A single drop landed on his palm, staining it a bright, shocking crimson. He brought his hand to his face, his eyes wide with disbelief. It was real. The rain, the lifeblood of the sky, was falling as blood. Terror, pure and primal, flooded him. He had to get out of the forest. He had to reach the village. Now. He turned and ran, his fear lending speed to his steps. The forest, no longer a place of beauty and wonder, was now a nightmare landscape, painted in shades of darkness and blood. Section 6. a perilous journey. The path, treacherous even in daylight, was a nightmare in the darkness. He stumbled and slid on the slick mud, his heart pounding in his chest. He pushed himself on, ignoring the throbbing in his muscles, the stitch in his side. The village, his only hope of sanctuary, beckoned. He ran until he could run no more. His lungs burned, his legs screamed for respite. He collapsed at the base of a giant peepal tree, its branches spread wide like protective arms. He leaned against its rough bark, his chest heaving as he gasped for breath. He knew this tree. It stood at the edge of the village, a silent sentinel guarding the entrance. He had played under its branches as a child, had sought shelter from the monsoon rains beneath its leafy canopy. But tonight, even this familiar landmark seemed strange, menacing. Section 7. Seeking Shelter. He pushed himself to his feet, his legs shaky. He could see the lights of the village now, twinkling in the distance like fireflies. He had to reach them. He had to tell someone, anyone, what he had seen. He had to know he wasn't going mad. His house stood at the edge of the village, its whitewashed walls gleaming faintly in the moonlight. Relief washed over him. He was almost there. He staggered towards it, his legs leaden with fatigue. He stumbled up the steps and onto the veranda, his hand reaching for the familiar comfort of the doorknob. But as his fingers brushed against the rough wood, a strange feeling washed over him. A feeling of wrongness, of something not being as it should be. He paused, his hand hovering inches from the doorknob. What was it? What felt so off? Section 8. The Cave's Embrace. He took a step back, his eyes scanning the house, trying to pinpoint the source of his unease. And then he saw it. The house, his house, was gone. In its place, a gaping maw in the earth, a dark, forbidding cave that seemed to pulse with a life of its own. He stared, his mind reeling, trying to make sense of what he was seeing. This couldn't be happening. It was impossible. His house, a solid structure of brick and mortar, couldn't simply vanish, could it? He took a step towards the cave, drawn by an unseen force. He had to know. He had to see for himself. He reached the edge of the abyss and peered into its depths. The darkness was absolute, all-consuming. He felt a cold wind brush against his face, carrying with it the scent of damp earth and something else, something ancient and evil. Section 9. A return to reality? He blinked, and the cave was gone. He was standing on the veranda of his house, his hand resting on the doorknob. The familiar scent of jasmine wafted from the garden, a comforting reminder of normalcy. He shook his head, his mind spinning. Had he imagined the whole thing? He opened the door and stepped inside. Everything was as he had left it. The furniture was in its place, the curtains drawn against the night. A fire crackled cheerfully in the hearth, casting a warm glow over the room. He could hear his wife moving around in the kitchen, her gentle humming a soothing balm to his frayed nerves. He closed his eyes, drawing a deep, steadying breath. He must have been more tired than he realized. The storm, the long walk, the red rain, they must have played tricks on his mind. He was home now, safe and sound. Everything was fine. Section 10. Whispers in the Wind. But even as he told himself this, a nagging doubt lingered in the back of his mind. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong, terribly wrong. He had seen what he had seen. He knew it. He had to find out what was going on. He turned away from the warmth of the house and stepped back out into the night. The village, bathed in the soft glow of moonlight, seemed deceptively peaceful, but beneath the surface he sensed a current of fear, of unease. He could hear whispers on the wind, whispers of strange occurrences, of unexplained disappearances. He set off down the narrow lane, his heart heavy with dread. He had to find answers. He had to know the truth, even if it terrified him, because some truths, he was beginning to realize, were too important to ignore, even if they shattered your world.